this is really grotesque for any lawyer out there, or anybody who's ever dealt with lawyers, or anybody that's ever dealt with grand juries or trial juries or whatever, anybody who believes in the fairness of a justice system. This is appalling. Something very strange is going on. One of the jurors for this special grand jury set up by the Democrat DA in Atlanta has been making the rounds on television, MSNBC, CNN, Sunday shows. Really, I think in violation of the judge's order, where he's basically said that you're not to release, or the DA asked and the judge agreed, you're not to release information about what this special grand jury came up with, because she needs a regular grand jury, does the DA, to actually bring indictments. So they're making recommendations about indictments. And this juror, singularly among the jurors on the grand jury, is making the rounds on these TV shows. She's almost giddy. She's loving the attention that she's receiving, and she's completely undermining the ability of whomever might get indicted to defend themselves with an impartial jury. And I certainly hope that is something that people will bring up if, in fact, they are charged by this rogue Democrat-elected district attorney. And my great fear is that she's going to use this to indict the former president, Trump, perhaps Rudy Giuliani. Who knows? Who knows? This door should never have been opened by the Supreme Court, but here it is wide open, where DA can just try and make a case against the opposition party that's now out of power. But Larry O'Donnell, you might remember Lawrence. Lawrence is a head case. Several years ago, we played the video of him screaming at his staff.
Stop the hammering out there. Who's got a hammer? Where is it?
I don't know. It's on a different...
Where's the hammer?
It's on a different...
Is it on the... Go up on the other floor. Somebody go up there and stop the hammering. I'll go down to the damn floor myself and stop it. Keep the damn commercial break going. Empty out the damn control room and find out where this is going on. It's either there or out there somewhere.
And he was like a complete unhinged maniac. Screaming at his staff in ways, honestly, I wouldn't even dream about doing to our folks here. And he came off as a fool because he is a fool. He's a hardcore Democrat. The Hollywood types love him. He used to work on Capitol Hill as a Democrat staffer, and he has the IQ of a banana. So let's take a listen to this, and he's enjoying this. But the fact of the matter is, anybody who's serious, or even unserious, but has enough sense to know this is bad. And even some of the people on CNN, Anderson Cooper and their legal analyst, even some of the people on MSNBC, shockingly enough, I think the Morning Schmo and a couple people there said this is a bad look, or as Nancy Pelosi would say, this is bad optics. Go.
Well, today in Georgia, NBC's Blaine Alexander conducted what is simply the single most important interview ever conducted about a criminal investigation of Donald Trump. We have occasionally seen interviews with jurors after they have returned verdicts in criminal trials. I have conducted interviews like that. I had one of the jurors in the Paul Manafort case on this program after she found Paul Manafort guilty. She was a Trump voter.
She's a Trump voter? She claims to be a centrist. I don't know that she's a Trump voter at all. And of course, Lawrence O'Donnell doesn't say that they checked the registration. It doesn't matter. This guy just, he'll say anything and do anything. Go.
Who told us that she took her oath to do her duty and did her duty. That was one of the more extraordinary juror interviews I've ever seen. Juror interviews are not common. Most members of juries in most trials never speak to the press.
You know why? They're told not to. I don't know if this jury was told not to or not. And grand juries are secret, unlike a full-scale trial jury. So this is the worst of the worst. Go ahead.
I have never seen an interview with a member of a grand jury before that grand jury's work has been made public. In fact, even after a grand jury's work has been made public, I don't ever recall seeing a grand jury member in a television interview.
because even though it's not illegal, you might say, I thought it was. It's illegal for the government to reveal information out of the grand jury. It is not per se illegal for a grand juror, but grand jurors don't do it because they're admonished not to do it, because it might affect the outcome of a full-scale trial and justice and the ability of somebody to have due process. And this guy is wetting himself in excitement over it. I don't remember. Oh, it's so good. Go ahead.
Today, 30-year-old Emily Kohrs, the foreperson of the Fulton County Grand Jury in Georgia that has been investigating possible election crimes possibly committed by Donald Trump and his associates, began her day doing a short interview with the Associated Press. It was possible for reporters to track down Emily Kohrs because, as the foreperson of the grand jury, her name was included on subpoenas issued by the grand jury. She told the Associated Press that she volunteered to be the foreperson of the grand jury. Then, in a short interview with the New York Times, she said that the grand jury did recommend indictments of several people. She said, quote, "It's not a short list." That's what she told the New York Times then. Emily Kohrs sat with NBC's Blaine Alexander for an extraordinary 42-minute.
And how dare the media exploit this? Go ahead.
Briefly, more than once, by the noise of the geese in the background of her location in Georgia. She told Blaine Alexander that she and the grand jury recommended the indictment of more than a dozen people.
And so we're talking about multiple people.
Yes.
How long, how many
multiple
people? Was this a long list?
It's not a short list.
So we're talking about more than a dozen people?
I would say that. Yes.
Okay. Are these recognizable names, names that people would know?
There are certainly names that you would recognize. Yes. There are names also that you might not recognize, or there are names that, like, you might recognize as someone who's followed this case, but then, you know, your mother might not recognize because she doesn't care about the intricacies of the case. But there definitely are some names that you expect.
Did the grand jury recommend an indictment of former President Trump?
I'm not going to speak on exact indictments.
Would we be surprised? Are there bombshells of who is being recommended for indictment?
I don't think that there are any giant plot twists coming. I don't think that there are any, like, giant, that's not the way I expected this to go at all. I don't think that's in store for anyone.
So nothing that would surprise people who have been following this?
Probably not. I wouldn't want to characterize anyone else's reaction, of course, but so that was when we heard a lot in testimony. But probably not. It probably wouldn't shock you. I would not expect you to be too shocked. No.
Do you notice how bizarre she is? And do you also notice how happy she is? It's been speculated here by some who would know that she may have some issues. I won't get into the specifics. And of course, the media wouldn't care. They'll exploit this for everything it's worth. But she is the foreman of the jury. Does she seem responsible enough to be the foreman, this 30-year-old? Why is she doing this interview? Go ahead.
And that includes of the former president, potentially.
Potentially. It might.
Okay. You're looking at a 30-year-old grand jury foreperson who's never done a television interview before. Don't expect her to be polished, and don't expect her to behave necessarily the same way she would if she were in this studio under these lights in this stiffer environment. She's in a place where she's very comfortable. She's being relaxed in the way she has her exchanges with Blaine Alexander.
I guarantee you, if this was being done to Obama or Biden or anybody, this guy would be pulling his hair out. And I would be attacking it too. But that's not the way Lawrence O'Donnell rolls. He's a partisan hack all through the phony Russia collusion stuff. He was spewing the lies. He's never apologized. He's never reversed course. He's a hack, like the rest of the lineup on that network. But this is really grotesque for any lawyer out there, or anybody who's ever dealt with lawyers, or anybody that's ever dealt with grand juries or trial juries or whatever. Anybody who believes in the fairness of a justice system, this is appalling. Go ahead.
This interview does not have the feel that you might expect in this kind of interview. Emily Kohrs explained why the grand jury did not subpoena Donald Trump.
I think that there were a lot of people that we could have subpoenaed, and there are a lot of people that we honestly might have subpoenaed, but there was also, I don't know, partially the time factor. Like, if we had subpoenaed everyone who had potentially something to say about this, we would probably be there for 2 years. You know what I mean? Like, there are just so many people involved. And I think at some point through this investigation, especially as we began to speak to higher profile witnesses, I think some of the combativeness that we experienced meant that the DA's team, as well as us, kind of started to pick our battles. And when someone, like, for example, goes before the January 6th committee and says they plead the fifth 200 times, do you really expect them to come before you and say something different? You know what I mean? And so it became a battle we didn't need to fight when we could fight other battles. And
wasn't that interesting? The January 6th events has nothing to do with this grand jury. Not a whit, nothing. And yet she's very familiar with it. And so the bigger picture is this. Do you really want our elections overseen or determinations made by people like this on a grand jury who you didn't elect or chosen out of a hat, who conduct themselves in secret, and then somebody like this comes out and makes public statements? Because that's where we're headed now.
Want to see more Mark Levin? Go to LevinTV.com and subscribe now.